Hey guys,
Hey,
we're
everybody.
back.
Hello.
How's everybody doing this week?
Doing
Oh,
great.
doing good. Doing good. Yep.
Good.
Anxious to go over this. I'm gonna post the link to the live stream. Anxious to go over these chapters. They were really packed full. But
Yes, they were.
They
yeah.
So
were
we're on
And
chapters 3 and 4 this week.
hmm
yeah,
And
I'll be
3
curious to
was,
know if we can even get through chapter 4 because it is so packed.
I don't know, it is very packed. 3 had some good information in it, but it wasn't very dense, but
Right.
4 is a lot.
Yeah.
We could
Yeah.
definitely spend a
Yeah.
whole week on 4 if we wanted to.
Oh
We
yeah.
could actually spend a
Absolutely.
lot of time on, I don't know why, but like for me, reading 3, I kind of knew it. But then,
Yeah.
actually, when she spelled it out, just about how much profit really is a motivator and how they
Yeah.
measure success. And I'm like, this really, my conspiracy theory brain has thought this stuff, but I never did enough research to really, I just always kind of suspected it.
Yeah. Well, I love chapter 3. I mean, it was my favorite so
Yeah.
far. And it's like you're saying you kind of suspect things, but honestly, I feel like I've been naive,
Me too.
because I didn't suspect that. Every time somebody would say, "Oh, well, the doctors get, incentivized for this or that." And I'm like, "No, they don't," I didn't believe any of that.
But the
So
whole
to
hospital
hear
system does not. I was very much more cynical, but my husband worked for years. He worked for Kaiser Permanente, which is an HMO, and he was always talking about the difference between the healthcare model with the HMO versus the PPO model, where like with Kaiser, is membership based. So people paid a monthly fee, whether they use the services or not, kind of like a gym. And so they didn't have to bill in order to collect money. They just used the money that was coming in from their monthly membership fees. And so their incentive was to keep people healthy so they wouldn't have to use as much of the membership money. And that's how they made their money. So I was aware a lot earlier on of the incentives to, like, they need people to be sick. They're going to go out of business if we're not sick.
Well, right now we have too much business. So, I almost think if we could get people healthier, maybe we could actually have room and not be, packed to the gills with people who don't have to be there.
Right. Right.
And her
Exactly.
story about her mom and the ending, she was basically already terminal when she was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And when she outlined the treatment plan and stuff, and I'm like, yeah. And of course, my brain, I mean, I would be thinking about my kids like if I was the mom too. I would be thinking about my kids and I would be thinking about how much expense it would be too. I mean, not that a life is worth expense, but all that expense for possibly her living maybe, a couple more months. And of course,
Yeah.
this was during COVID. And see, my mother passed during COVID and I didn't get to
Mhm.
see her. So when she was talking about that, that really hit home too, because if her mother would have been in the hospital, she likely never would have gotten to see her mother again. And
Yeah.
I almost cried when I read the part about the right before she lost consciousness and they were
I
at that
know.
spot and she was with her
Yeah.
husband. And I was just,
And they went to the place, just so everybody knows that hasn't read the book. They went up on, it was like a hill, I think, near the ocean where they were going to bury her mother. And her mother had one of her last days. I guess it was her last true day of consciousness. And she
Mhm.
just kind of got like a second wind and wanted to go there and wanted to see everything. And it was just such a beautiful moment. She was talking about how beautiful and perfect it was.
Yeah.
And her and her husband, had some real quality time together. And then the kids, well, which they're older, but Casey and her brother, and they were all embracing. And it just like, I just saw it in my
Yeah,
mind.
I
It was
did
like a
too.
movie,
I did too. Yeah. And she lost consciousness while she was there and never regained consciousness. So that her last conscious moments were in that beautiful location, which was going to be her final resting place. It was really beautiful. I wanted to kind of just for people, of course,
that's
you
how
have,
everybody,
Yeah.
that's how everybody should be able to go in the way
yeah.
that is right for them.
Oh yeah, exactly. Well, I wanted to go through what they learned. So she was seeing, so she made some really poignant points in this chapter. But she was talking about how they had gotten her diagnosis of pancreatic cancer and they were going to Stanford Medical Center, which is considered one of the most premier, medical centers in the nation.
Mhm.
And they were recommending, it sounded to me like they were recommending even some more diagnostic procedures, as well as some just like a liver stent and some other issues of blood transfusion. And it's things that when she talked about the things that were being recommended, they didn't sound unreasonable when it comes to having pancreatic cancer, like when I first was reading it. But she actually, and I would assume most people would say, sure, right? And I'm
Yeah.
wondering how much of her questioning was also because it was during the pandemic and she knew that if something happened with her mother, she'd get stuck in the hospital. But she did some research. She said she learned that with these particular procedures, that her mom had about a 33% chance of extending her life a few more months at most, a 33% chance of shortening her lifespan, and a 33% chance of not impacting her lifespan, yet keeping her away from family, because each time she needed to go and have like the blood transfusion, she had to go to the hospital. And she said her mother's blood counts were so low that it made her prognosis even worse and potentially complicating these procedures. And so it was interesting. And then, of course, there were the COVID lockdowns at the time. And so she said that it was really interesting what she said. She said she confirmed with the oncologist, you are recommending, this is a quote from her, you are recommending an invasive diagnostic procedure that would under no scenario extend her life more than a couple months and risk my mom dying alone in a hospital room, even though we are certain that this is stage 4 pancreatic cancer based on the CA19-9 blood test and CT scan, and that she has liver failure and almost no red blood cells left. That was her question to the doctor, and the doctor replied, yes, that is what we're recommending. It's like,
Yeah.
whoa,
That's like to check their boxes. That's like when I go to the doctor and they're going down their list and they're checking their boxes. Am I there for you or are you there for me? Because that's not benefiting me in any way. Same situation.
Right.
And I had a similar
Right.
situation with my son when he was 2 months old. 2 to 4 months. He had a big cyst in the back of his airway. And I mean, he could have died, honestly. Like it's a whole big story. I've probably told you guys before, but basically before the surgery, they wanted to do an ultrasound on a 4-month-old. And I'm like, okay, in order to do an ultrasound on a 4-month-old, you're going to have to, or a CAT scan, I think. Sorry, CAT scan on a 4-month-old. I said, okay, in order to do this, you're going to have to sedate him because he's not going to lay still for a CAT scan.
Right.
Yes, that's correct. Okay, why are we doing this? Well, we want to look at the cyst and see what kind of cyst it is. And I'm like, what? Okay, am I crazy or does it not matter? Like, you have to get it out regardless. So, what is this actually doing besides racking up a whole large bill for your sedation and your procedure and all this stuff that's totally unnecessary? Because when you get in there, you're in surgery tomorrow or whenever, you're going to see what kind of cyst it is and you're going to deal with it regardless of what kind of cyst it is. So And I actually talked to one of the anesthesiologists, and he was like, "Oh no, we're not doing this." And we were already there for it. Like, we had gotten up, we had gotten the baby ready, we'd gotten there, and took time out of our day to do this. And he's like, "No, this is totally unnecessary. I agree. We're not doing this."
You
And
think,
Wow.
especially
yeah,
for a baby, you
Mhm.
know,
I'm sorry.
you would think,
What'd you say?
especially for a baby, because
Oh
with a
yeah,
baby, yeah, you're gonna remove it,
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was
So,
covering. It was this cyst was 4 to 5 centimeters. 2.5 centimeters is 1 inch. This is a 4-month-old baby. Like, it was
wow.
almost covering the entire, the largest part of his airway, thank goodness. But
Mhm.
it was so big that, like, he was failure to thrive. He was little bitty skinny. He couldn't
Oh,
keep
poor baby.
anything down. It took him forever to drink milk, because he couldn't breathe and drink at the same time. But
Mhm.
that's a whole, long story. But basically, it goes to show that, like, they're wanting to know this for their records. Like, oh yeah, we need to know what we're going in. Really? Do you? Do you?
Yeah,
Like, let's use our common sense, folks.
yeah,
That's the
yeah. And
problem that I have.
it may be different for someone who's older and they need to find out, like, do a PET scan, figure out, are we dealing with a metastatic disease here, or are we just dealing with an isolated, cyst or tumor or whatever. But for a baby, yeah, that's like, that doesn't make any sense. And of course, this
It
chapter is
absurd. It
titled
was
Trust
totally
Yourself.
unnecessary.
Yeah, the chapter is called Trust Yourself, Not Your Doctor. And
Here's Yeah,
yeah,
one thing
but
that really struck me is that she talked about that there are these protocols, like you were saying, Kim, they have to tick the boxes for the treatment. And she was basically saying, that people rave about their medical team and they have this, like, especially, and she's using this example in the context of cancer, but she was saying, at that point, since they have these things that they're just supposed to do, that's really not that's just how we're kind of misled to think that, oh, well, I have the best, whatever, insert famous hospital name here. And the quote that I love here that really impacted me, she said, saying you have the best medical team after a cancer diagnosis is like saying you have the best mechanic after totaling your car. In other words,
yes,
you're already at that point. There could have been so many interventions beforehand that could have been done, mainly, preventative, like, lifestyle, diet, that kind of thing. And those things are never addressed. And then you get to this cancer part and all this time, money, resources being spent. And, it's just, and for what? Like she was talking
yeah,
about in context of her mom, maybe increasing her life possibly by 2 months. It just,
right.
and it would be a
Yeah, that was,
terrible 2 months because she would be miserable. She would be in the hospital. She'd
yeah,
be alone.
yeah. And in that statement, I really was drawn to that statement too, because she says, and this is something I haven't heard anyone say, but it is really true. She said, the truth is the caliber of your doctor matters very little after cancer diagnosis. Because
Mhm.
basically, she said, they're going to prescribe you the same thing as
Yep.
every other doctor and do the exact same thing.
Because
Yes.
of
So
standards of
going
care.
it's the
Mhm.
standard of care. Exactly. Yeah. So that was really interesting that she said that. So obviously the goal is to prevent, right? But she talked
And
about,
on the other side of that coin, I'm happy that we have standards of care, because I will get the same treatment here in my Kentucky hospital as I would at Stanford, you know?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so that's good. It's a good thing in a lot of ways. And a lot of these
okay,
things came about for good reason,
Yeah.
you know?
yeah.
It shouldn't
But
matter
but
how.
it does very much prevent a lot of thinking outside the box. box. So it is a good thing. I agree, because we need to have, like, if we've seen that something works, and we need to make sure that that's what you're going to get, no matter where you're at. But I think it also, it's a catch-22. We need to have the guidelines and standard of care, but we also need to understand that, like, the whole role of nutrition, that's not factored into the standard of care at all, because there's no money in it. So that's where you kind of end up crossing into the dark side of medicine.
And then what they do is they say, well, we could recommend lifestyle changes in diet, but the people won't do it. They deride that. And I've heard this before, that basically they just sort of dismiss, saying that, well, they won't do it anyway. And, they're too lazy to exercise, or just whatever it is. And so they're just not going to do it. So we're not even going to tell them. And
I
to
will
me,
say
it's
in
like,
medicine, I'm sorry, Carrie.
no, go ahead. That's it. That's basically it.
I will say in medicine, I have noticed over all the years I've been a nurse, 24, and over all the hospitals I've ever worked at, there is a pessimistic view of patients and what they're willing to contribute to their own health maintenance. They're not going to exercise. They're not going to follow any special diet. They're not, like, it's just kind of like a pessimistic view of it. Like they're just coming to us and they just want to turn their bodies over to us and have us do everything. And while that's true for a lot of people, you don't know what somebody would do because you've never asked them, because you're not even trained in nutrition. So,
Well, can you imagine if we redefined pre-diabetes as people who had hyperinsulinemia, how that might psychologically impact people's willingness to change their diet? Because that's like 15 years before they ever develop diabetes. They start to be hyperinsulinemic and get insulin resistance. And if that should really be pre-diabetes,
and like she was saying,
based on blood sugar.
And like she was saying, if several heads of like prestigious organizations would come out and say we need to decrease sugar consumption for children, people would do it. Not
she said
everybody.
if the Surgeon General says it, because she commented that when the Surgeon General said that smoking is bad for your health, the rate of people smoking went down. So she was always calling on the Surgeon General to be the one to step up and do it.
So, not everybody would do it, but some people do try their best to follow recommendations from reputable sources.
Well, and can you imagine if the advertising changed in conjunction with the Surgeon General stepping forward and talking about sugar, and then the advertising on TV and the kids programming changed? That together could really impact people. And because, we look at the message, we pay attention, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, to the messaging around us. Right. But it would have to be, I don't see that happening, because I think there's too much money in.
Well, but here's the thing, let's just pretend that the messaging to the kids never change. But let's say that the Surgeon General did come out and say, your children don't need to eat this much sugar, no added sugar, et cetera. And as the parents, there's a big disconnect, because people kind of act like these kids can just hop in and just go buy their own stuff. The parents are the ones who buy it for their kids. So the parents could just, at that point, just say, no, I'm not giving it. I'm not getting that for you. You're not going to eat that. At least not in my house. My mother never bought
what they exchange at school. But
But my mom just never bought what she called kid cereals. She didn't buy that stuff. She just, of course, cornflakes isn't a whole lot better, but the added sugar wasn't there though, So but I just think, I mean, the parent controls what's in, they're the ones that make the paycheck and go to the grocery store and buy it.
But
So
what we need is education for
yeah.
people,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
none of us are getting any education on nutrition. I mean, I
Right.
was a full-grown adult before I even really knew what foods were high in carbohydrates. I mean, I remember when I
Mhm.
tried starting the keto diet, I would have to text my friend and say, "Well, is cabbage high in carbohydrates?" Like, I didn't know, and I was a registered nurse, like,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be. Parents should know that when they're giving their kids juice, it's basically just like pure
Sure.
sugar, and then without the benefit of the fiber in the actual, and then also it's like 6 oranges instead of 1 orange like you would normally eat. I think
Right.
a lot of parents think juice is healthy for
They
kids.
do.
And that we just need more education, because people aren't too stupid to make good choices. They're uneducated.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and also the portion sizes have increased. I know that when I was growing up, my mom, she always made me breakfast, and sometimes I'd have a glass of milk with breakfast. So sometimes I'd have some juice, but it was a little 4-ounce glass. She had these itty bitty little 4-ounce juice glasses, and none of us, myself or my parents, ever drank more than just that little 4-ounce glass of juice. And that was it. And
Mhm.
nowadays, I mean, the portion sizes are crazy. I mean, you can have 16 ounces, 12 ounces, and that's insane. So, I mean, even though I drank some juice as a kid, it was very little, like compared to what kids get nowadays. And
I had juice
so,
as a kid, but it had pulp in it. So I feel like
oh, I
that might
hated
have
pulp.
kind of helped a little bit, because you're getting some of the fiber. But I mean, I
I
don't.
mean, slow it down. But it's interesting how she talks about surgeons, and it's like, I wish that the whole world could hear what she had to say, because
Yeah.
so many people are just believe, especially with a surgeon, like if a surgeon says I need surgery, then I need surgery. But she was talking about oncology because, of course, of her mom, right? But she said that if you walk through the doors of a surgical oncology department, you are going to get an operation, whether you need it or not. Like, whoa. And she
That was
talked about
impactful.
how if you decline the surgical intervention, the department leaders would ask to send a sign event against medical advice paperwork, and be left with fewer resources to seek palliative care or less invasive treatment options. So there's like this, when you're a surgeon, your job is to operate, and scary, kind of scary that you can't hardly even like say no without, and they put this pressure on you, and they look,
Yeah.
And it's pretty bad. Like a patient being able to make those decisions for themselves is under a lot of pressure from people who technically should know more than we do, right?
And you're sick, so, and the
Mm-hmm.
family is afraid. Everybody is afraid. And so you're talking to this surgeon, and they're pressuring you, and you're under duress. I mean, you don't know what to do. You really don't. And her mother was lucky because she did have 2 children who were very, very well educated in that world, who could advocate for her. Most people, and she
Yeah.
said in here, most people don't have that. And it's very intimidating and scary.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had an aunt that was stuck in the hospital. She went in the hospital in March of 2020 and never went home again. And it was sad. So yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, what they
conspiracy
do is they
theories
call
have
a
a bad
conspiracy.
name, right?
They
But
call it a conspiracy theory just to belittle you, to make it seem like what you're reasoning through is not legitimate. Like either
and
you're not
conspiracy,
educated or you don't
conspiracy is
understand.
just, it's just people conspiring together.
Mhm.
They're So basically the conspiracy theory is just that we think that this is some people talking about this, and actually it's not just random, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reminded the size of juice glasses. Yeah, we do have a distorted view of serving size for sure. You should learn about food just like we learn math and English in school. Yeah, right information. Yeah, not the food guide pyramid. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I liked another thing that I wanted to read that I thought was really good. Is the section on, it's called Trust the System on Acute Issues, Ignore It on Chronic. And I really like what she had to say. She said most healthcare books give recommendations and end with a disclaimer to consult your doctor. I, as a carnivore, am never comfortable with it. I've done it myself on some things, but I'm like, don't consult your doctor. They're going to not tell you the right thing. But she said, I have a different conclusion. When it comes to preventing and managing chronic disease, you should not trust the medical system. She said, this might sound pessimistic or even frightening, but understanding the incentives of our medical system and why it does not deserve a benefit of the doubt is the first step to becoming an empowered patient. I like that she said that, because there's always this disclaimer, even among the carnivore community. I've heard so many people, even the doctors, say, consult your doctor. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably.
But I know why they do it too. They do it
I do
because
too.
going against conventional wisdom.
And also, like, we have to be careful in what we say and how we say it, because, well, for one thing, we have licenses to protect. We are a part of the conventional medical system. Some of us are. But also, not everyone is capable of taking their health into their own hands, nor does everyone want to. So, in saying what she said, I understand where it came from, and I agree with it. When you're talking about somebody who actually has the ability, the mental capacity to do that, there are a lot of people out there, just from experience, just from talking to people, my patients, they don't want any part of that. They want to hand themselves over to you and say,
oh yeah,
here.
I see that all the time. But is that because they assume the whole give the doctor the benefit of the doubt thing? Is it because they assume that the doctor knows everything that there is to know and they trust them? I mean, like, if people understood how little the doctor knows about chronic disease, would they then maybe at least go into their doctor's appointment with more of a questioning mindset? I think that we still need to enlighten people that, look, these doctors, they don't know anything about nutrition. And I think a lot of people, the more they think, like, okay, has your doctor ever told you, like, the real underlying cause of why you have this disease? Or did they say, okay, you have this disease, here's how we treat it, here's a pill to take? Like, do they ever actually tell you what led to you having this disease? Very rarely does that happen. So
that's because that's not the focus of medicine, of modern medicine. The focus is not root cause analysis. The focus is treating symptoms. And they treat symptoms primarily with pills and surgeries. Right. And, like we were talking about earlier, if you go to a surgeon, they're going to tell you from a surgeon's perspective what they think you need. Yeah. They're not going to give you a meal plan. They're surgeons, right. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Right.
Surgeons are trained to do surgery. And
right.
Usually you're referred there by your other doctor who thought surgery might be the best option. So, I know I can be really, really, really hard on doctors, probably of the worst of all three of us. But I just think that it's a fine line, it's just,
Well, we've talked about this
It's
before
hard.
too, where she talks about this where they go in, they want to heal, they want to help people, they want to cure conditions, diseases, whatever. And then they just get it beaten out of them, basically.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
Yeah.
she goes into the whole, and I've heard people refer to the Rockefeller thing before, but I've never looked into it. And she goes into that, like how they actually, I mean, it was just kind of decided that this is how we're going to, um, qualify people to be medical professionals. And this was done in 1910 and it hasn't changed since. And it's basically you just beat them to death. I mean, you just work them to death and belittle them and whatever. And that just really bothers me, because you've got these great minds, these people who are scientifically minded, they want to help. And they go into, like she was talking about, all this debt and everything to accomplish that. In many cases, they go into a lot of debt and stuff, and then they're just disillusioned. I mean, after all of that, it's sad.
Yeah.
It
Well,
really is sad.
when she talked about how many doctors commit suicide every
Yeah.
year, I mean, I knew it was high, but it's like the equivalent of, what did she say, like 4 medical classes or, 4
Mhm.
Graduating. Yeah, it was like
4 graduating.
400 doctors a year, I think she
Yeah.
said, committed suicide or
Mhm.
something like
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
She said it was like twice the rate of the general public. And she did
It's
talk a lot
awful.
about the doctors being very, very disillusioned with the healthcare system and kind of knowing that they're not in a good functioning system. I like the part where she talked about how the medical system gained our trust because they were very, very good at handling acute issues. And
Mhm.
that they, like things that were life threatening in the past, and we developed the sanitation, we got antibiotics. So a lot of people used to die from infections, bacterial infections. We discovered antibiotics, and then we are starting to actually have these acute, life threatening illnesses become very treatable, and people weren't dying. And she mentioned that the patient is quickly cured with these treatments now, so they're no longer a big deal anymore. But she said that the trust that people developed trust because the doctors, the healthcare system solved all these acute life-threatening issues. And so we generally then tend to continue to trust when it comes to chronic issues. And
Mhm.
she's basically saying that trust has not been earned like it was with the acute issues.
I think what's important to do for individuals is to choose your doctor wisely, get some referrals from other people and, good experiences that they've had with them. And then, pick a doctor who's open-minded and listens. Just this is the most
Mhm.
important 2 things on a doctor is their ability to listen.
Mhm.
Because
Right.
you as the patient, you often have you might be pointed in the right direction, but what I like to use the doctors for is, okay, doc, I've got this narrowed down. I think it's either this or this. Can you help me sort through this? And I think it
Mhm.
should be a partnership between you and your physician,
Absolutely.
and there are so many really good physicians that can do that with you. And, if you ask them pointed questions like, okay, if this was you, this is off the record, doc, if this was you right now, what choice would you make? That's what I like to ask them. Or I like to say, this is my favorite, is to throw mama in there. If I were your mother, what would you tell me to do? You
Mm.
know, and a lot of times they will give you, you know, the real deal, the real info at that point. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and then, she ends the chapter by suggesting that we save ourselves, that we're not going to fix the modern healthcare system. It's going to take a lot of years for that to happen, but if we can just each take our own health and our data into our hands and try to do the best we
Yeah.
can to learn about what our conditions are.
Yeah. And I think it's important, though, to comment on what she said about the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, because you can't assume that going to see a dietitian is going to be the solution. She said that 40% of the funding for the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics comes from the food industry. And she said these financial conflicts have led the largest and most influential dietitian group to endorse many cans of Coke as healthy, to attack the idea that sugar causes obesity, and to lobby against sugar taxes.
Yeah.
So you just have to be aware of whatever, you go to see a dietitian, they're not going to be any different really than these doctors. They have their guidelines and they have their funding coming from these big food companies. And even she said the American Diabetes Association is receiving money from the likes of Coke and Cadbury, which we knew, so yeah, I mean, having your eyes open to where the money flows is really important, and find a functional medicine doctor,
Mhm.
at least that they're a little bit better on the right track, right?
Or sometimes you can even find doctors that are in the mainstream system that are trained in functional medicine as well,
Mhm.
or osteopaths also. You
Yeah.
see a lot
Yeah.
of doctors of osteopathy. DO is on the end of their name, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
are integrated into the system just like MDs.
Oh, yeah. One of the gastroenterologists that I worked with in my last, job was a DO, and he was unbelievable, is so good and well loved. And I actually had some patients that, like the patients when they didn't want to see him because he was a DO. And I'm like, what? He was probably the best loved doctor in our whole department. And it was just weird. There's some people that just still have this thing about
That's
DOs.
That's because a lot of the MDs have basically put down the DOs over the years, and
Yeah.
kind of, oh, they're not like us, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like they put down chiropractors and
Yeah.
naturopaths and, these alternative practitioners that used to be the mainstream practitioner. Okay. So Cynthia got hit by a car 3 times and very grateful for acute care. Yeah, exactly. Healed myself with proper diet, nutrition, and movement. Movement is so
How
important.
how do you get hit by a car 3 times? 3 times? How?
Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Those
3
Canadian drivers.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. But yeah, that's definitely some bad luck there. So,
What this chapter made me think of, um, when I was raising my boys, I can't remember how many years ago. It's probably 15 years ago, but I remember that they actually tried to come out, and I'm sure it was like a sugar company or a cereal company or something. They actually tried to come out with this study that told moms, oh, don't worry, moms. Sugar does not actually make kids hyperactive. And as moms, we were all like, what?
No, that ain't
Like,
true.
what are you talking about? Like, it literally does. You can see it. It's just hard
yeah,
to
no
believe what
kidding.
some of these companies will try to force out as,
Yeah.
oh, we did this study now. You can all relax and give your kids tons of sugar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
when I was a kid, I mean, we called diabetes sugar diabetes or having the
yeah.
sugar. I mean, down here in
Yeah,
the South, I mean, that's
some people
yep,
still do. They still
In
yeah.
the
call it,
South,
"Okay, I
I
got the sugar."
still, yeah, sugar diabetes, as if there's another other kind. But she said that
Mhm.
80% of American farm bill subsidies go to corn, grains, and soy oil. And she said that tobacco, this is still, I guess, because this is a new book, receives 4 times more government subsidies than all fruits and vegetables combined. So all fruits and vegetables combined get 0.45%. So I'm assuming that's also the corn, the grains, the soy. And tobacco gets 2%, which is
Nina Teicholz had mentioned that in her book too.
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty crazy. But all right. Yeah, this is a good chapter for sure.
She said, people don't look. She was in Florida.
So much for the Canadian drivers.
So much for the Canadian drivers. It's the Florida drivers.
Oh my gosh.
All right. So shall we move on to chapter 4?
Yes.
Yeah, let's do.
Okay, so chapter 4 is the heading is Your Body Has the Answers: How to Read Your Blood Tests and Get Actionable Insights from Wearables. So this chapter is a really long breakdown of like the various tests and encouraging you to wear a CGM. You know, even if you don't have diabetes, wear a maybe one of those rings that track your sleep and your heart rate. Wear your watch and keep up with this stuff. Data is very important, and it can tell us so much about our health. If we look back, you can just make so much of it if you really look at it. One of the most important things that I found when I went keto was that my heart rate always ran like right at 100 or even higher if I was up moving around. And on keto and carnivore, I run, 80s. That's pretty much pretty.
And according to now, that's when you're moving around.
No, just resting.
Okay, and now
average. It's probably my average actually.
Yeah, and even what she says in the book about heart rate, which we'll get there, that's still high, right? Because she said that like my resting heart rate on carnivore is like mid 50s.
Oh, mine would never be that low. My heart rate's never been that low. It varies from person to person.
That's resting heart rate.
Mine would never be that low.
Yeah,
it varies.
Mine's like in between. It fluctuates. Mine's been in the. I've had it in the 50s, but usually mine's like in the 60s and 70s. Usually, like right around there. But it's been in the 50s. I honestly don't check it a whole lot. I mean, all the data is going in my phone and stuff. Like I mainly just use this thing to track like sleep, which my sleep is terrible. I mean, it is. I'm working on it. I've been watching videos and stuff and she talks about how important sleep is to everybody does. And we all know it's important. And I don't get the sleep that I need even now, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things she talks about to kind of lead into this chapter about our lab work, she's talking about, she does a story about a particular person that she treated, but she talked about symptoms being a gift. And I thought this was really good that she brought this up because she mentioned, and we've talked about this before, about these patients who say they feel fine, right? And then she said that they dig into a detailed symptom questionnaire and then they find out that there's a lot of stuff that people just think are normal, but they're not. And she said these symptoms often include neck pain, seasonal sinus infections or recurrent colds, eczema, itchy ear canals, lower back pain, acne, headaches, bloating, reflux, chronic cough, a little anxiety, trouble falling asleep, low energy, PMS symptoms like cramps and moodiness. She said none of this is normal. She said you can and should feel incredible mentally and physically most of the time. And that's something that is, I know it's true. I am still having a hard time grasping that they're like, you can feel incredible and you should feel incredible because we've so normalized not feeling good that we don't even know when we're sick until it becomes more severe. And so one of the things she talks about is again, if you go see like a functional medicine doctor, she even talks about, she's got a health questionnaire on her website. So if you want to take your own like assessment, she said, I'll go to her website. She has a detailed health questionnaire that she points out to the book that you can just kind of evaluate, like, have you had these symptoms at all over the past 30 days and find out, are you really at optimal health or not?
I
And if you're
meant to
not,
do that. Did either of you take the? I
No,
didn't
I
either. I meant to
No.
do it. I meant to go back and do it, and I didn't.
But
I was
honestly,
curious
even
if
when I
y'all did.
read over her symptoms that she mentioned in this particular section, I still have several of those that I haven't overcome yet. So, which tells me I'm not there yet.
It's going to take, it takes a while for people to get there. I mean, I still have stuff too, that pops in. Like I do have a neck issue that it's a million times better than it was before keto. But I mean, it's still, will like flare up sometimes. And I'm trying to look at patterns, like what she was talking about, like looking at what you eat, like when things happen. Now, my diet in general doesn't vary, but I will tell you, like yesterday, for example, I had a bunless burger, but I did have lettuce and tomato with it. And I don't feel as optimal today. I mean, it's not like I'm sick or anything, but I feel a little out of kilter. I mean, not bad, but just not optimal, I guess, maybe.
I think a lot of people are sensitive to tomatoes.
Yeah. And I think that's what did it.
I think tomatoes are high oxalate, aren't they? They're higher.
They're nightshades for sure.
Yeah.
Nightshades. Yeah. Oh yeah. Nightshades are not good for us at all. But yeah. So I think for me too, it's not always diet that's causing the symptoms. It could be poor sleep. It could be lack of exercise, like not moving around enough and not getting your blood, got to get the heart pumping and get the blood flowing. And it helps too with your lymphatic system. I mean, we have to activate our lymphatic system just as much as we need to activate our circulatory system to get the waste products out of our system. And if not, we're going to end up with symptoms. So, I mean, so being sedentary, it's not just your circulatory system, it's the waste removal system that's kind of getting sluggish as well. Which is probably why when I started my rebounder, I ended up feeling worse because my poor lymphatic system had been sluggish for so long. And then I started doing the rebounder and I felt like crap because all this stuff suddenly started flooding and getting, flushed out of my system. And it's something we need to be aware of is get moving, Yeah. So, all right. Just want to dive into the blood tests.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing she mentioned though, she said, this is another statistic. She said that only 6.8% of the people in the United States meet the normal criteria for the 5 basic metabolic markers without medication. I was shocked by that low statistic.
So that's even fewer who are optimal then, is the way I interpreted that. Because less about normal and
less than 10% of us.
Yeah.
Like, I guess there's people who can be markers, like the 5 markers for metabolic, syndrome on medication, but very few off medication are actually really healthy. That's sad. So,
yeah.
All right. So the goal is to get into that.
These ranges 20%. Surprise y'all? Like when you look
optimals.
Yeah. Like
the optimal for the heart rate shocked me because if I was 50 to 60, I'd be dead.
Well,
I'm not even talking about the ranges for the blood test, but just like the ranges for a lot of this stuff shocked me.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily. I mean, if your heart is pumping strong, 50 to 60.
But usually, people's heart rate, unless they're a young athlete, they're not going to be in the 50s. That's that
to me.
Usually that means you have a weaker heart if you're in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we were
taught. I'm not saying
right?
you do. I'm just saying.
Oh, no.
I see a lot of heart rate.
That's what we were taught.
Kim's like, I've seen a lot of heart rates.
I've seen a lot of heart rates, and usually
Oh yeah,
really low
I have
either
too.
means really low either means they're really good or really not good.
That's right.
Well, I
Most
think
people
that's
are in the hospital.
context.
But yes, exactly, Carrie. It's context. Like diet is, that the diet factor is probably the reason why Lynn's heart rate is she has, I'm sure, a healthy heart, and she's,
Yeah.
lower. I don't know. I don't know why my heart rate won't go down that low, but 70s and 80s is, if I went down to 60, it'd be unusual.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was working cardiac in the hospital, I mean, I know they tell you the normal range is 60 to 100. And I mean, I wasn't comfortable with people in the 90s. I mean, even though that wasn't
You
technically
weren't
considered,
comfortable?
not really. I mean, unless there was a valid explanation and there was why we were treating it, but I feel like the range, I guess what I'm saying is I feel like the range should be more like 50 to 90 as far as
There's a lot more 90s than there
normal.
are 50s
There
across the board
are,
with
especially in
everybody.
the hospital. I mean, when you're
But we
fighting
have to
infection.
consider, yeah, like why people are there. I can't talk. Why people are in the hospital, what they've had done, what medications can do to the heart rate.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see a lot more 90s on just your average patient than I do 50s for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and they're the sick people that are in the hospital. But if there's somebody in the hospital that's been running in the 70s and they jump into the 90s, I'm not going to be comfortable with that for sure. I mean, any jump like that, 20 points is to me an early sign that something's going on. But if you hang out in the 90s as your baseline and you're not, you think you're healthy, maybe this is the point I'm trying to make. If you think you're healthy and your heart rate hangs out in the 90s, I would be investigating why. Because even though it's technically considered normal, I still think that's too high. That's my personal opinion. Is there something that's causing it to be on the high end of that normal range? And so, but we will get to the heart rate section. The first section is triglycerides. And so she did talk about the insulin resistance and the relationship between insulin resistance and triglycerides. I mean, she talked about insulin resistance in relation to most of these lab tests, which was, I think, one of the things that I was maybe not expecting, that them all to be related to insulin resistance, although I shouldn't be surprised. But your triglycerides are higher when you eat more carbs, basically. Did you guys measure your lab and see like a reduction in triglycerides when you went carnivore off carbs?
Mine went down a little bit. Mine traditionally were like around 90, as like keto / low carb keto. And then they're down. Like I've seen people like who have triglycerides like 45 or 50. Mine have never been that low. I think the last time I got it was like they were like 70 something. I know I've got an HDL. Let's see, my ratio is like right at 1. So I know my HDL was 77. So my triglycerides were something like 73 maybe or something like that.
Wow. My triglycerides are like, last time I got them checked though was last September. So I carnivore. I mean, before I was carnivore, my triglycerides were in the 140s. And then carnivore end of May of last year. And then in September of last year, I got blood work and my triglycerides had gone down to 92. So I don't know what they are now. I need to go get my blood work done. But they definitely, in that short period of time, they dropped pretty significantly. But my HDL is always low. Not low, it's low. I mean, it's low. It's on the low end of normal. It's lower than she said should be for women. What are yours, Kim?
My triglycerides dropped, but they were never high. I've never had high triglycerides.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because I ate just awful food and I was obviously insulin resistant. My insulin was
Yeah.
high. My hemoglobin A1C was in a pre-diabetic category. And I still, that just goes to show like you can't look at the mainstream labs that they're getting because they're usually not getting a fasting insulin on you. And you can be pre-diabetic for, I've heard upwards of 15 to 20 years without it showing up on the mainstream stuff because if your doctor doesn't get a hemoglobin A1C, which a lot of them don't.
Yeah.
What is it? Ben Bickman calls it, they're glucocentric when it comes to diabetes. And it's really the insulin it's an insulin problem with type 2. It's not a glucose problem. The glucose problem just means it's gotten extremely bad.
And the insulin is the indicator they should be looking for, not the glucose.
Right. That's why I think they should redefine pre-diabetes to be based on the insulin and not the glucose. So, because your body's compensating. To me, when your body starts to try to compensate for when you're high, insulin is high and stays high, your body's in a compensatory state. And our bodies can compensate for a long time before failure happens. And it's like, if you can catch it during the compensatory phase, then that's the ideal time. But yet no one talks about, these doctors don't even measure your insulin levels. And so I just feel like it'd be helpful for people to know that, look, you may look, you're not diabetic now, but you're on the road to being diabetic.
Yeah.
And
instead of just being completely blindsided like I was.
Exactly.
And like a lot of people, not that I was diabetic, but I was pre-diabetic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I had eaten like absolute garbage for decades before I officially became pre-diabetic. And I was like, look at me, like I can eat all this garbage and I'm not diabetic. Little did I know until I was in that compensatory phase. Hey,
I
Dr.
saw
Nelson.
him earlier in Dr. Kiltz's stream this morning. So I told him, I reminded him of our book club.
Nice.
So he made it.
Yeah, this is a good point. This is the kind of thing we need from a doctor's perspective, because I don't know anything about the pay. I don't have anything to do with the insurance or the payment or anything. So I never really know, but I know my doctor does give me a hemoglobin A1C when I ask for it, but I guess I'm probably just paying for it because, I always have to pay a little bit extra for my labs.
I think mine is standard once a year. So if I did ask for it because I have a 6-month in between appointment every year. And so that's when I also asked for the fructosamine and the fasting insulin too. And I just told him I would pay whatever, if he couldn't get them to cover it, I would pay. But they generally do the A1C once a year for for your physical part of your physical.
Yeah. It depends on where you're at.
I guess the question is, what would be the diagnostic criteria? If it's obesity, most people qualify. I don't know, what is the diagnostic criteria to justify insurance paying? Yeah.
I've seen a lot of really obese people that aren't diabetic though.
Yep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
and whether or not it's probably that situation where they just haven't been diagnosed with, insulin resistance because their insulin's not being checked. But
oh yeah, I'm certain my insulin levels were high for decades before I became pre-diabetic for sure. And how quickly it reversed. It was, with the carnivore diet, that was pretty amazing. So not even for just screening. Most doctors won't oppose to doing the test, but insurance will pay for screening.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I can't imagine being a doctor and having to fight with these stupid insurance companies and having people call you that know less than you do about this and trying to tell you what you should have or shouldn't have done. And yeah, I'm not built for
Yeah.
that. Sounds like a
Well,
lot of fighting.
yeah, working outpatient medicine my last, 7 years, I had to do some of that because we had, just treatment, getting denied treatment for patients and having to go and submit appeals. I wrote so many appeals letters for our doctors and learned how to appeal these denials for the insurance companies. And, they don't just say, go by necessarily, okay, well, the doctor thinks this is the best thing for this patient, so therefore we're going to cover it. It's not the way it works. They're making the rules. And either the doctor's got to justify, and
My daughter
defend
used
themselves.
to work as like a liaison, like a patient liaison between the insurance company and a hospital is what she used to do. And so she would tell me, "Oh, it's very involved. You're right, Lynn. I mean, well, not just because my daughter did it, but I can identify with what you're saying because my daughter would tell me the same thing that you have to. There's not just saying, well, the doctor believes this is the best course of treatment. I mean, you have to go into all why this wasn't enough and what additional information this could give you that by bypassing that wouldn't and all. I mean, it's very
And sometimes it's just a
involved.
matter of things being coded improperly too,
Yeah.
or
It is
coded in
sometimes.
a certain way that would lend the insurance company to pay for it. I used to do a little bit of coding and I was awful at it. And I feel like I might have messed some people up. I don't know. But it was this company that trained nurses to be coders, and they trained us very poorly. And we were just basically thrown in there, and you got paid the same amount of money, no matter if the chart was 5 pages or 300 pages.
Ooh.
And yeah, it was like, oh, well, you get $15 a chart. Okay, that's great for the 3-page charts, but what about the 300-page
Mhm.
charts?
Mm.
Yeah, it was awful. So I just imagine that if they don't have people that are good at doing the coding, I mean, that job of coding is very hairy,
It's very
Mhm.
detailed.
in depth.
Yeah. Yeah, very detailed. But so back to triglycerides, just to let people know, she said that the normal range of triglycerides is under 150 milligrams per deciliter, but she gives optimal ranges, which I appreciate. She said the optimal range is less than 80 milligrams per deciliter. So based on my previous lab test from last September, mine still was not within the optimal range. It was 92. But again, that was only a few months after going to the carnivore diet. I don't know what it is now. I need to get my lab work done and see. I'm curious to see.
I'm trying to pull mine
So,
up because I'm
oh yeah,
curious.
definitely. So I'll read what she's while you're pulling yours up. I'll read what she says. She says the research shows that the probability of a cardiovascular event, for example, heart attack and stroke, is 50% less in people with triglycerides under 81 milligrams per deciliter versus in people with levels between 110 to 153. Yet doctors tell both groups they are in the normal range. So you're actually at a much lower risk when you're 80 or under. So, and she did mention that her triglyceride levels were like 47 on
Mhm.
2 vastly different diets. She said she was on a low-fat vegan diet, a high-carb, low-fat vegan diet, and then she said she also was on a more omnivorous, higher-fat, moderately low-carbohydrate diet. And both times, her triglycerides were 47. But she said the key was she was eating whole foods. She wasn't eating the sugar and the processed foods. So I guess if you're metabolically healthy and you're eating a, paleo type diet or whatever, you can probably still be, have good triglycerides. I don't know. And then HDL, she said that the normal, now She said the normal, what's considered normal range is different for men versus for women. She said above 40 for men, above 50 for women. I don't know if mine is ever going to get above 50. We'll see. Last I had mine checked, it was 42. And I know it reminds me of the conversation I had with Dr. Baker in Austin about HDL cholesterol. He said that a lot of times people with higher muscle mass will end up on the lower end of normal for HDL cholesterol. I don't know if there's science behind that. He indicated there was. But yeah, mine's still not
Now,
there
mine's
yet.
always been like above. I mean, I've got records. I need to just pull them up one day and do a spreadsheet or something. 'Cause, I mean, I can just access them on my phone like Kim does. And
Okay.
we've got an app. And but so my HDL has always been really good, but it's been best on carnivore. And my HDL the last time was 77, which but I've seen people, a lot of the people in the carnivore space, I mean, theirs like goes over 100, which she kind of says later on that like there can actually be too high of a value for HDL.
So my HDL is 83.
That's good.
That's awesome. Heck yeah, Kim.
I mean, I didn't do anything on purpose. And then my triglycerides are 72.
So you have a great ratio.
Yeah.
Under one. Yeah. My ratio is still not great.
This is why my doctor wrote, your recent lab results show an elevated but stable LDL cholesterol from the previous year. No pharmacotherapy is warranted at this time. And so I think he was not just going on the LDL because it was high. My LDL is 176. But I think he's more going on because I discussed the triglyceride to
that's good.
HDL.
Dr. Nelson gave us some more explanation too about the
oh wait, I gotta show y'all this first. Kim is gonna live forever, Mike says.
I think of that song by Queen that they played in
That's
Highland.
Right. Who wants to live forever?
Yes.
Oh wait, let me show you my high sensitivity CRP, Mike, and you might not think that, but it is improving. It's above 5 though. It's like 5 point something. So
I've never had my CRP tested. I need
this
to
is
ask.
not just the CRP, it's the HS.
Yeah, the HS. Yeah.
Which they say is just cardiac, but that is not true.
Yeah, wait till we get to my HSCRP results. You guys are going to think I'm about on death's door.
I think it's from like autoimmune stuff, and I think I have. I think I have autoimmune disease, but I just haven't been diagnosed because, well, quite frankly, I won't allow the doctors enough time to do a diagnosis because I just gave up on them. But anyway, what were you wanting me to read? This one?
We have 2 more comments from Dr. Nelson.
This one?
Yeah, there we go.
So Medicare's list of medical necessity diagnosis, all of them are for either type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, or another abnormal glucose. Okay, so not obesity.
I know why. I think I know why that they're doing an A1C every year then on me is because back a few years ago, I don't know if it was like a fluke thing or just what, but my glucose, everything else, I mean, looked good, I guess, but my glucose was, I don't know. It was high. It wasn't like extremely high, but I have a diagnosis like from years ago that says abnormal glucose. So I'll bet you that's why they do it once a year.
If you want to get an hemoglobin A1C test, this is not a recommendation for me. I'll just be keeping it real. You just have to cheat. You have to drink some juice before your test and don't tell them. And your blood sugar glucose is going to be high.
Dang, you exposed me, Lynn. No.
Let me tell y'all a little secret, okay? Unless you're going to the same doctor for your whole entire life, your health history is what you say it is. Okay. So, you can leave out whatever you want, or you can add whatever you want. I'm not encouraging that you lie, but like, if you were to say, I've been pre-diabetic in the past, Um, can I get a hemoglobin A1C? See,
Yes.
they're
And I'm
going to
not
write that
encouraging
down.
people. I'm not
And that's
encouraging
what it
people to
is.
cheat.
Not saying cheat the system, but
Yeah. But if you're so inclined, there are
but it
ways.
is what you say it is, you know? And that's always been very, like, I've always had a problem with that when it comes to patients' health history too, is you can tell a lot about a person, about their personality by reading through their health history. Because if it's like super detailed, like probably like mine looks ridiculously detailed and like so much just
Mine
goes
too.
off here and there, it tells you they have a little bit of a OCD type personality, and they're noticing every little symptom and they want to give you every bit of information. It's nothing bad about them. I'm that way. But then you'll have Papa that comes in that's ain't going to no doctors, never been to no doctors, and doesn't have any health history. Papa has health history, y'all. We just don't know about it because Papa's not he's not
That's right.
telling us like you should.
Dr. Nelson has a legitimate not cheat the system recommendation for everybody.
Here we go.
Good. So you can buy it over the counter at
Oh,
Walmart.
okay, yeah.
$35 for 2 tests. Awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
5.4.
So 5.4. Good. My eyes are burning.
Yeah,
I've got these
don't ever cheat the system unless you think they would cheat
No.
you, you know.
Well, yeah.
Then I mean, I
You get
guess it's
cheated
just
all the
fair
time.
game, right?
My seasonal allergies, I'm sure, are an indication that I have something still going on. That I like, my eyes are burning. I have to wipe my eyes because my eyes are burning. So, still struggling with some things.
You may actually have some seasonal allergies. Like
Yeah, who knows?
actually seasonal.
Actually seasonal.
You know,
Yeah,
not the seasonal allergies
that occur year round.
Yeah. That's what I always had.
About medical history, she had mentioned in here, and I didn't know this, in I think it was like 22 states or something like that, that people's medical records are not considered to be their property. Did y'all see that in here? I was like, I didn't realize that because
we're real
Dr.
funny.
Berry, yeah, he'll
They're real
say
funny about it.
that it's yours, but apparently in like 22 states, you don't own your medical records.
So I don't know what the actual law is in Kentucky, but I know like they're really super funny about it. Like you can't just come up to me as your nurse and say, "Hey, can I have a copy of that, EKG report?" I can't give that to you. You have to go through medical records. So they almost make it, and this is not just the hospital I'm at currently.
Right.
This is any place I've ever worked in Kentucky. They have to go after they leave the hospital. They have to go and request the medical records from the medical records department. And it's like a big ordeal. And even as far as like looking over my shoulder at the record as I'm charting or anything, that's not allowed. It's just, it's really
the same thing in Washington State as well.
Yeah.
And, even if, so for example, like if you get a procedure done, if you want to have the actual data, like a diagnostic exam, if you want to have the actual data, you have to go to medical records, because what you get from the doctor is like a results letter. That's basically them summarizing the data, what the findings are, but it's not the actual data from the procedure itself, very rarely. So yeah, that is true. Okay, so she talks about blood pressure being related to insulin resistance. And she said because of the nitric oxide, one of the functions of insulin, which we learned, is to stimulate nitric oxide, which relaxes, dilates the blood vessels, which will lower your blood pressure. So she said blood pressure is directly related to insulin resistance. And the normal range is, less than 120 systolic, less than 80 diastolic. And she talked about waist circumference too. And the three types of fat: subcutaneous fat, visceral fat, and ectopic fat. So
there you go, Carrie. Ectopic.
Fat where it's not
supposed to be.
That's right. So she said the subcutaneous fat is not considered to be dangerous, and more of it is not associated with increased mortality. The visceral fat coats the organs in the abdomen, so like blanket fat on top of your liver, intestines, spleen. It is dangerous, promotes chronic inflammation, increases the risk of disease and early death. The ectopic fat is actually inside the cells of various organs like the liver, heart, and muscle. It is dangerous. It blocks insulin receptors and increases the risk of disease and early death. She also talked about how visceral fat is unique in that it acts as a hormone secreting organ, secreting pro-inflammatory chemicals that recruit inflammatory cells. And I'm wondering if this is why my CRP is always elevated, because I still have too much visceral fat. Like, I measured on my body composition scale. It has improved. I have lost so far 12 pounds of visceral fat, according to my body composition scale. Like, it started out at 30, and the upper end of acceptable for my height and being female is 11. And so
I feel like it's probably more than, like, I feel like that it's more than that. Like, more of an inflammatory process was kind of what I was thinking. That's why I was leaning towards autoimmune with mine. But I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
It's probably multifactorial. Yeah, it's probably multifactorial. For me, I'm saying that that's probably another contributor, is too much visceral fat. Like, I'm down to 18 now, so I have like 7 more to go to get into that, but I've lost 12. So I'd be curious to see what happens. But here's my question about this that I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on. She talks about waist circumference. She says it's useful, albeit rudimentary indicator. But wouldn't your waist circumference include your subcutaneous fat? And if the subcutaneous fat is not dangerous, I mean, is it like, how is that just a measurement of your visceral fat?
Well, so I think once you start getting real thick in the waist, it is mostly your visceral fat that's protruding everything. It's pushing on your organs. And
so is it maybe that you don't necessarily gain as much subcutaneous fat around your actual, like, literal waist? I mean, I know that when I measure, like, I've got a line basically kind of around the umbilicus level that is like, I got poochie fat below that and poochie fat above that. But yet there's this line that tends to be my actual waistline. So maybe it is that the subcutaneous fat grows maybe in different places. And that's so, yeah. And so, yeah, interesting. So I thought that was kind of I wanted to ask you guys what you thought about that. But yeah, maybe it is your waist itself tends to be more like less subcutaneous fat and more of the other type of fat.
So let's see here. So I was just wanting to read this real quick about HS, or high sensitivity CRP. A high sensitivity C-reactive protein, HS-CRP test, indicates inflammation in the body, but the cause can't always be determined. Some possible reasons for elevated HS-CRP levels include acute infections, bacterial or viral, and I would also think that fungal. I kind of thought my candida might play might play a role in that. Injury, major trauma, chronic disease, inflammatory bowel disease, RA, lupus, and other autoimmune diseases can cause moderate elevation of HS-CRP. Heart attack, pancreatitis, bronchitis, cancer, and rheumatic fever can also cause elevated HS-CRP. And then it says risk factors. Aging, smoking, and obesity can also cause elevated HS-CRP. For example, if you're overweight or smoke and have high HS-CRP levels, the CRP could be related to these risk factors instead of indicating an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So this is why Dr. Berry says, like, HS-CRP is not just indicative of cardiovascular risk. Like,
And so for those of you who
whenever I
don't know,
first
CRP
learned about it,
is an inflammatory marker.
whenever I first learned about it, I thought I'm getting ready to have a heart attack because mine was like, I think mine was like 10 or something the first time. This
Okay.
was several
So
years
mine
ago.
did as high as 25.
Oh,
My
wow.
last one, September, when I had my last lab work, this was several months after being on the carnivore diet, it was still 16.21.
But it went
So
down
Yeah,
significantly.
it did
it
go
went
down.
down. Yeah. So low risk is under 1.0. Average risk
Mine's like
is
a 5 now.
1.0 to 3.0, and high risk is over 3. So like that's why I said, like,
Yeah.
if you hear what my CRP is, you think I'm on death's door.
Yeah, that's
Because
what I mean. I was freaking out. And I never got this done from a regular doctor. It was always from my functional medicine doctor. And so when she first did that, I mean, until I listened to Dr. Barry and he was talking about, you know, this could be from other things, autoimmune, and, you know, just general inflammation from infections and things like that. I was scared to death.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's
it's
understandable.
unnerving.
Mhm.
Okay.
Waist
I'm so glad Dr. Nelson's
Waist
here.
circumference is an indirect indicator. Nowadays, a scale that includes bioimpedance measurements costs around $20. I did a DEXA scan in August in Austin, and my numbers were surprisingly accurate. I can't talk today, y'all.
Accurate.
Like adding stuff to the end of words. So that is really cool that it was
That's
fairly
good.
accurate.
Because I use the impedance scale for myself. And
Because
so,
I always
when I
thought it
report my
wasn't.
I've got a Vivitar. It's the one Kelly Hogan had recommended.
Uh-huh.
It was like $20.
Okay.
I ordered it off of Amazon, and I just haven't done that part of. I haven't even weighed myself. I was gonna do videos. I was gonna weigh myself every day and do all this. And of course, I haven't done it. But anyway, I need to just mess with it and just get it set up to where I can check that. I'm just curious.
I didn't know how accurate it was, but I do know that it gives me extremely consistent trends. And so figure, well, I'm looking at the trends anyways. And so, but that's good to know that the DEXA scan was really accurate. That's, with your scale. So that's
Yeah, I always thought,
encouraging.
how accurate could it possibly be? But I guess the technology is just so much better than we even realize.
Well, I mean, it has the electrodes on it, and the whole technology is basically, the same type of concept. I've used those scales that when I was going to see a bariatric surgeon years ago, and it was basically the same thing. You step on the electrodes with your bare feet, and it sends a signal through your body, bumping into tissues and giving biofeedback on what type of tissue it's bumping into. So it's really not that complicated of a concept.
When you get something on Amazon for $20, you don't expect a lot from it.
You wonder, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Well, that's how it is with technology, though, right? You start out with it's super expensive, and then it just keeps getting cheaper and cheaper.
That's true.
Maybe we're just in a good time. But all right, so you guys, we're not going to get through this chapter.
No.
Where do you guys want to stop?
Oh, this might be a good point, I guess.
What time is it?
Yeah, we're almost going on an hour and a half. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm good with stopping if you guys want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to start talking about the triglyceride HDL ratio next time.
Yeah.
That's on that next page after waist circumference.
Yeah, we kind of skipped around. So yeah, we can go back to that. That would be good.
And the HOMA IR too. I would like.
Oh yeah. Do you guys want to just do the rest of this chapter for next week? Or do you want to tackle chapter 5?
I mean, I think we've got lots of stuff here to talk about.
Yeah, we've got.
I do too.
Yeah, I think
I almost want to listen to this again.
I do too.
And yeah, because there was so much. And then, I might actually read it in the book because I do have the book here. Because sometimes hearing her go through the lab values, it kind of starts to become a little bit meaningless because all the numbers just start.
Charlie Brown's
Right.
teacher.
Yeah, it's like, okay, numbers. What are we talking about again?
Yeah,
So.
exactly. But you know what? It was good, like, to go through and like look at my labs from the last time I had them done.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go get lab work done tomorrow, potentially, and I should have the results by the time we meet again, and maybe I can see what my updated labs are.
Yeah,
That might be an incentive because I've had an order from my doctor for quite a while now, and I haven't gotten the labs done. So maybe I'll do it tomorrow as an incentive to be able to report on how things have changed. And fingers crossed. I hope that CRP is continuing to come down.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's just so scary when it's like, I've never even heard of this before. I'd never had any doctor order or anything like that on any of my patients that I even recalled. And
well,
so
I even have an APO. I even have
scary,
ApoB
yes.
results. Like my naturopathic doctor,
I
I have
do.
baseline ApoB results, and I have another ApoB test and she mentions that in this chapter.
I think I have that from my functional medicine doctor. Like, she literally ordered every test known to man.
Oh, wow.
But it's hard because you have to like flip through to look at the results. I'm gonna have to look at the piece of paper that she gave me.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah, I
guys.
have a fractionated LDL ordered as well. I don't know if I'll get that back in time or not, but I'll have to go get it done tomorrow. And then it's fasting lab work, so I'll do it first thing in the morning, and then hopefully I'll get a lot of the results. I should have a lot of the results within the next day, but some of them may take a little longer.
Now that will be interesting. Yeah.
All right, guys. I think we're going to head out. So thank you for coming and hanging in there with us and commenting and participating. And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye, my friends. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Have a good week.